Seattle rain drew thin lines down the kitchen window, turning the streetlights outside into soft, blurred coins. Miles Harper leaned on the counter and watched batter spread inside the waffle iron. Cinnamon and butter warmed the air. The radiator clicked. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's dog barked, once then stopped. Lucy sat on a chair that was too tall for her, swinging her legs like pendulums. Her curls were still damp, and a glittery comet on her pajama top caught the light when she breathed. On the table beside her cereal bowl, she had lined up 3 folded paper boats, each creased with the seriousness of a shipbuilder. "Is it going to be a star this time?" she asked. Miles lifted the lid a crack. Batter had escaped again, bubbling at the edges. "A star," he said. "A star after a hard day." Lucy accepted that solemn. "Stars are busy." He laughed under his breath. The laugh surprised him. Some mornings gave him that a small, clean sound that felt like it belonged to somebody else. The fridge held a permission slip under a cartoon salmon magnet. Lucy's handwriting was on a sticky note, "Daddy lunch." Another note in Miles's handwriting read, "Call dentist." The notes made a crooked map of their life taped together by routine. Miles flipped the waffle onto a plate. It was a star only if you were kind. He poured syrup in a slow spiral and set it in front of Lucy. She took a bite and chewed eyes on him. Lucy had his brown eyes and her mother's stubborn mouth. When she stared too long, Miles felt exposed, like she could see the thoughts he tried to keep tucked away. "Did you talk to Ms. Vale yesterday?" she asked, as if she were asking about the weather. Miles reached for a dish towel, buying a second. "Veronica Vale is my boss, Lou. She is not your teacher." Lucy shrugged. "She still has a boss voice. Mrs. Nolan has a boss voice, too." "Mrs. Nolan is in charge of second graders. Ms. Vale is in charge of a media company." Lucy leaned in, lowering her voice like she was telling a secret. "Is she mean?" Mean was the word kids used when a grown-up made their stomachs tighten. Veronica Vale did not yell. She did not slam doors. She simply looked at you like she was reading a report only she could see. "She is demanding," Miles said. "She wants people to do their best." Lucy considered that. "Does she make people cry?" Miles covered a snort with a cough. "People cry over spreadsheets. It happens." Lucy frowned. "That is silly." "It is," he agreed, and signed the aquarium permission slip on the counter. The pen scratched, then finally cooperated. Hannah used to tease him about that. "You can run a department," she would say, "but you cannot make a pen behave." The memory landed and slid away before it could cut too deep. Miles set the pen down carefully anyway. "Shoes," he said. "We are leaving." Lucy hopped down, stuffed the paper boats into her backpack, and wrestled the straps over her shoulders. She did not complain. She saved complaints for important things, like when Miles forgot to read the last 2 pages of a chapter. They stepped into the hallway with their coats. Miles grabbed the umbrella with the bent rib. Outside, the air smelled like wet cedar and pavement. Rain beaded on Lucy's hood. She held the umbrella like a shield, tilting it toward herself. "You are doing that on purpose," Miles said. Lucy looked up wide-eyed. "I am protecting the important one." "Nice try." Miles opened the car door for her and buckled her in. Traffic moved slow past coffee shops and gray storefronts. Wipers squeaked. Lucy hummed to herself and pressed her palm to the window, tracing a circle in the fog. At the school curb, she climbed out, then paused. For a second, she looked small inside her bright raincoat. She leaned back in and kissed his cheek, quick and almost shy. "Bye, Daddy." Miles smiled. "Have a good day." Lucy took 2 steps, then turned back. "Be brave," she said, like it was an instruction from a worksheet. Miles blinked. "Brave?" Lucy shrugged, already backing away. "Just be." Then she ran, disappearing into a knot of kids under umbrellas. Miles stayed parked for a moment after she was gone, listening to the rain tick on the roof. The car smelled faintly of Lucy's shampoo, sweet and clean. He inhaled and held it, then let it go. Downtown was all glass and steel. Cascadia Beacon Media took up 3 floors of a building that looked like it had been designed to keep warmth out. Miles' badge swiped through the lobby and rode the elevator with people staring at their phones, faces lit blue. On the 20th floor, the air was colder, filtered smelling of toner and lemon cleaner. Keyboards clicked in the open office. Voices stayed low. No one had to whisper, but they did. The quiet had a new shape lately. Veronica Vale had arrived 7 months ago and remade the place without raising her voice once. Under the previous CEO, deadlines were flexible. Under Veronica, deadlines were lines. People stopped bringing excuses to meetings because she treated excuses like clutter. Miles had tried at first to impress her. Better presentations, cleaner slides, numbers checked twice. She nodded sometimes and moved on. praise from her was rare enough that when it happened, people looked around as if they might have imagined it. He crossed the floor toward his office, passing framed covers of old magazine issues that once meant something bigger. His reflection moved beside him in the glass, a man in a navy coat with tired eyes that only softened when his phone background flashed Lucy's smile. In his office, Miles set his bag down and straightened the stack of campaign mock-ups on his desk. He opened his laptop. A calendar alert blinked in the corner quarter review prep. His stomach tightened, familiar and automatic. He reached for his phone, then stopped with his hand hovering. The screen was dark, reflecting his face back at him like a question. Miles slid the phone into his desk drawer and shut it. He picked up his notes, squared his shoulders, and stepped out into the corridor, heading toward the conference room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere ahead, a chair scraped, then fell quiet. Miles breathed through his nose, tasting coffee and rain on his tongue still. Miles turned the corner toward the conference room and caught sight of the glass wall, ahead a clean rectangle of light and faces. He slowed without meaning to. His palm pressed briefly to the folder in his hand like the paper might anchor him. A laugh drifted out from somewhere quick and nervous, then vanished. The hallway smelled faintly of burned coffee. On the far side of the open office, someone was already wiping down a whiteboard with the desperation of a person trying to erase yesterday. Miles changed direction and slipped back into his office instead. The door clicked shut behind him, soft but final. He set the folder down and stared at the drawer where he had put his phone. The wood was scratched near the handle from years of rushed mornings and impatient hands. He told himself he did not need to look. He told himself he was already late. His fingers pulled the drawer open anyway. The phone woke under his touch, bright and too alive. Notifications sat there like little flags. One from Lucy's school app, one from a grocery delivery service, and one that made his chest tighten in a way that was not panic, not exactly. Sophie. Her profile photo was a cropped smile and a strand of dark hair tucked behind an ear. Nothing flashy, no filters that screamed for attention. The kind of picture that felt like it had been taken in a kitchen, coffee in hand, someone laughing off camera. The message was simple. So what are you actually looking for, Miles? He read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might change. He could have answered with a joke. He could have kept it vague, safe, polite. Most people did. He knew the script. He leaned back in his chair and listened to the building settle around him. Keyboards, the far-off whir of a printer, the hiss of the heater turning on, the rain's steady insistence against the window. 3 years ago, he would have known how to answer without thinking. Hannah had been the place he put his thoughts, his hands, his fear, his joy. After she died, he had learned how to move through days like a man carrying glass. Careful, quiet, avoiding sudden gestures. The dating app had been downloaded late one night after Lucy fell asleep on the couch, and he sat alone with a cold mug and a too-bright television. It had felt ridiculous, like trying on someone else's jacket. He had stared at the sign-up screen for a long time before his thumb finally moved. The first week had been a parade of awkward messages and forced laughter. Then Sophie appeared in his inbox with a question about a book he had mentioned in his profile. She had made a dry joke about marketing slogans. He had laughed out loud, actually laughed in his empty kitchen. Now she was asking him to be real. Miles opened the chat and began to type. He paused after 2 words, deleted them, tried again. He wrote, "I am looking for something easy." He stared at it. Easy was a lie. Easy was a word people used when they meant not too much work, not too much risk, not too much feeling. He deleted it. His fingers hovered, then moved with a steadier rhythm. "I am looking for connection. I am a single dad. I am not great at this." That sounded like a job interview. He deleted that too. He set the phone down and rubbed his face, fingers pressing into his cheeks until he felt awake. The skin under his eyes was rough from not sleeping enough. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Lucy at the zoo, her arms thrown wide like she could hug the whole world. Behind the glass, the edges of a second photo peeked out, older one he rarely looked at directly. Hannah in a hospital room, smiling even then, her hand curled around his like it was nothing to be afraid of. "Be brave," Lucy had said. Miles picked up the phone again. He typed slowly this time, letting the words arrive without forcing them. "I miss being close to someone. Not just texting, not just talking. I miss the little things. Someone stealing a sip of my coffee, someone touching my shoulder when they pass behind me. I miss falling asleep with another person's breathing in the room." He read it, felt heat rise in his throat, and almost erased it. Instead, he kept going softer at first, then sharper like a door opening. "I have spent 3 years being careful. I have done careful very well. I am tired of careful." His thumb hesitated. That line felt too bare, too true. A knock tapped at his door, quick and professional. Miles locked the phone screen and slid it beneath the folder. Yeah. His assistant Jordan leaned in. Jordan wore a headset like it was part of his skull and held a tablet to his chest. "Budget meeting in 10, he said. "Ms. Vale is already in the room." Miles felt the words like a shove. "Thank you." Jordan's eyes flicked to Miles's desk, then away. Everyone had learned to look away from everyone else's weakness around here. It was a quiet agreement. When the door shut, Miles exhaled and stood. He grabbed his folder and his tablet. He should have left the phone behind. He knew he should have. He put it in his pocket anyway. The conference room sat at the end of the corridor, enclosed in glass that offered no mercy. Through it, he could see the team arranging themselves, shoulders squared, smiles pasted on. A pot of coffee steamed on the sideboard. Someone had set out pastries that no one would touch. Veronica Vale sat at the head of the table, as if the chair had been built for her and no one else. She wore a charcoal suit so perfectly cut, it looked like it had been drawn onto her body. Her hair was pulled back into a smooth knot at the base of her head, not a strand out of place. A silver watch caught the light when she moved her hand across a printed report. She did not look up when Miles entered. He took a seat halfway down the table, not too close to the head, not too far to seem irrelevant. His folder made a quiet thump on the surface. His tablet lit up. He opened his notes and focused on the numbers until the digits stopped swimming. "Good morning," Veronica said. It was not warm. It was not cold either. It was simply a statement of time. A chorus of good mornings answered her slightly delayed, like a room full of people waiting to see if the floor was stable before stepping. Veronica began without small talk. "We have 28 minutes. We will keep to the agenda. If you do not know an answer, say so, and we will move on." Her gaze traveled along the table, landing on each person for a second. When it touched Miles, it felt like being scanned. He held her eyes and forced his face into something calm. She looked away first, already turning a page. The meeting moved in clean blocks. Finance, operations, sales. Each department head spoke in a careful cadence, as if reading from a script they had practiced in the mirror. The air was dry. The coffee smelled rich and bitter. Miles listened, took notes, nodded when it made sense. He was good at meetings. He had learned how to make his voice steady when his mind was not. Still, the phone in his pocket felt heavy. Every time it shifted against his leg, he thought of Sophie's question, sitting unanswered. He thought of the words he had written, the ones he had not yet sent. He imagined her staring at her screen, then shrugging, then moving on to someone who did not need to be coaxed into honesty. A small vibration against his thigh made him jump. Miles froze, pulse spiking, then realized it was only the silent alarm he had set to remind himself to check Lucy's pickup time later. His body did not care. It reacted the way it always did now, fast and sharp, like it had been trained to expect bad news. Veronica's voice cut through a report about ad spend. "Mr. Harper." Miles's head lifted. His mouth went dry. "Yes," he said. Her eyes were the color of dark rainwater, not bright, not soft. "You have been quiet this morning." "I am listening," Miles replied. A few people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. In this room, quiet could be interpreted as either competence or fear. Veronica tilted her head slightly, like she was evaluating which one he was. "Good," she said. "Then you will be ready when we reach marketing." Miles nodded once, crisp. "Yes." The meeting moved on. Miles kept his hands folded on the table to stop himself from touching his phone. He took a breath, then another, steadying his pulse. He reminded himself he had a job. He had a daughter. He had a life that depended on him being steady. And he reminded himself quietly that he was allowed to want more than steadiness. When a lull opened as two executives exchanged a look over a spreadsheet, Miles slid his phone out under the table. The screen lit his palm. He angled it toward his lap and reopened the chat with Sophie. His draft stared back at him, too intimate for a Thursday morning, too human for this room. He read it again, line by line. "Someone stealing a sip of my coffee. Someone touching my shoulder. Breathing in the room." His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He added another sentence, then erased it. Added a different one. Erased that too. A chair creaked as someone shifted. Veronica's pen tapped once against the table, a small, precise sound. Miles felt it in his teeth. He glanced up. Veronica was still looking down at her papers, her expression unreadable. He lowered his gaze again. His thumb moved careful, and he began to type in shorter bursts, shaping the message into something he could live with. Something honest, but not desperate. Something that sounded like him, not like a man trying to remember how to be touched. On the other side of the table, someone cleared their throat and began explaining projected revenue. Miles nodded at the right moment's eyes on the phone. Mine split into two streams. The screen warmed under his fingers. Above the table, Veronica turned a page. The paper made a crisp final sound. Miles's heart climbed anyway, as if his body knew that any moment could become the wrong moment if he let it. Veronica turned another page. The paper snapped lightly like a curtain being pulled. Miles felt the sound in his ribs. He kept his face neutral and his shoulders loose the way he did when he was pitching to a difficult client. Under the table, his phone warmed against his palm. The draft to Sophie sat open lines of honest need that did not belong in a corporate budget meeting. Someone near the far end of the table was talking about vendor costs. Numbers floated past Miles's ears without sticking. He nodded at the right times. He made the small expressions that suggested he was fully present. His thumb hovered over the blue arrow. He told himself to put the phone away. Instead, he reread the last sentence and added one more quieter and more dangerous than the rest. I miss heat. I miss being wanted so much it feels like a dare. His chest tightened. That line had no business existing, not here, not in daylight. He swallowed, then tried to soften it to make it sound like a joke. His fingers erased two words, added two more, erased them again. Veronica's voice cut in clean and direct. Operations. Your revised forecast. Miles looked up. The room's attention shifted as one. He felt it like a spotlight. A man in a navy blazer cleared his throat and began to speak. Miles forced his eyes to his notes and stopped breathing through his mouth. He breathed through his nose instead, slow and careful. The phone vibrated once. His pulse jumped. This time it was a real notification, a tiny tremor against his skin. He glanced down fast. An internal message from Jordan's slide deck updated. Numbers on page 6 changed. Please confirm. Miles stared at it. He had forgotten that Jordan and he had started using text for quick updates when meetings ran long. He had forgotten that Veronica had texted him twice last month, after hours, both times about campaigns, both times clipped and urgent. He had never deleted the thread. It sat there with her name like a warning label. He tapped the notification to close it. His thumb slipped. The screen shifted. The thread header at the top was not Sophie. It was Veronica Vale. For a second, his brain refused the information. The letters looked like they belonged to someone else's phone. He blinked hard. The name stayed. His stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling down stairs. He tried to back out, but the room moved around him. Veronica asked another question. Someone answered. A pen clicked. Miles's thumb, traitorous and numb, hit the send arrow before his mind caught up. The message launched. There was no animation, no drama, just a small, soundless swoop, and then the word, delivered beneath the last bubble. Miles stared at it, frozen. The text sat there like a stain. Lines about missing touch, about wanting someone in his space. A line about a kitchen counter, the kind of phrase that could only be read one way. Nothing obscene in a legal sense, but too personal, too intimate, and now aimed like a spotlight at the one person in the building who could end his career with a sentence. His mouth went dry. Heat climbed up his neck into his face. His ears rang. He locked the phone screen so hard his finger hurt, then slid the phone back into his pocket as if hiding it could undo what it had done. Across the table, Veronica was still speaking, calm, controlled. She was looking at a spreadsheet and marking something with her pen. She had not checked her phone. Miles held very still. His hands rested on the table, fingers lightly curled, knuckles pale. He tried to swallow and could not. He forced a breath through his nose. Veronica's eyes lifted suddenly, not to her phone but to him. Miles. The use of his first name landed like a slap, even though she had done it before in meetings, usually when she wanted a direct answer. Today it sounded different in his head. Everything sounded different. Yes, he managed. You were going to speak on marketing allocation for the Johnson account. Her voice stayed level. Nothing in it suggested she had seen anything. Nothing in it suggested she was about to ruin him. Miles's vision narrowed. The edges of the room blurred. He nodded once too sharply, then flipped open his folder with hands that did not feel like his. He began to talk. Words came out. Sentences formed. He pointed to figures, referred to percentages, cited performance from the last quarter. He sounded competent. He sounded like a man who had not just sent his private loneliness to the company's CEO. Inside, his mind screamed. Veronica listened without interrupting. When he finished, she held his gaze a beat longer than usual, then looked down and made a note. "Thank you," she said. Miles waited for her hand to go to her phone. It did not. The meeting moved on. He sat through the rest of it like a person underwater. He heard his name twice more, and answered both times with what he hoped were coherent words. He did not check his phone again. The idea of seeing that message a second time made him nauseous. When Veronica finally closed her folder, the sound was definitive. "We are done," she said. "Send any revisions to Nina by 3. Chairs scraped back. People stood and gathered their things with polite urgency. Miles rose too fast, his knee bumping the underside of the table. Pain shot up his leg, a bright, clean sensation that grounded him for half a second. He wanted to run. He forced himself to walk. He kept his face blank. He did not look at Veronica. He did not look at anyone. He moved through the door and into the corridor with what he hoped was the pace of a normal man leaving a normal meeting. Only when he reached the hallway corner did he let his breath out shaky and thin. He ducked into an empty copy room and shut the door. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The air smelled of paper and warm plastic. His phone sat in his pocket like a live thing. Miles pulled it out with careful fingers and unlocked it. The thread was still there. Veronica's name still at the top. His message still delivered. No reply, no read receipt. Just the words sitting calmly indifferent to the fact that they had detonated his life. He stared at them until the letters swam. He pressed and held, hoping for an option that said, "Undo." There was none. He searched for delete for both parties. There was only delete for me, a coward's erasure that would remove evidence from his own screen, but not from hers. He let the phone drop into his palm. His hands began to shake. He thought of human resources. He thought of the board. He thought of Lucy's small voice telling him to be brave and how bravery had never included this kind of stupidity. He started typing an apology, a formal one, a desperate one, a simple one. "Ms. Vale, I am deeply sorry. That message was sent in error. It was not intended for you. I understand how inappropriate it was." He stared at the draft. It sounded like a man writing his own termination letter. He did not hit send. He put the phone away and stood there in the copy room until his heart slowed. When he left, he walked with deliberate calm, as if calm could rewrite time. The day dragged. Miles sat at his desk and tried to work. He opened campaign files and stared at them without seeing. He answered emails with short responses that felt like they were coming from someone else. Every few minutes, his mind yanked him back to the same image Veronica in that conference room, her phone on the table, her hand moving across paper, her face unreadable. At 11:30, Nina passed his office door. She did not glance in. She did not pause. She carried a stack of documents against her chest like armor. At noon, Miles went to the break room and poured coffee he did not taste. Graham Lasky stood at the counter stirring sugar into his cup. Graham's smile was easy practiced. Harper Graham said, "Big morning." Miles forced a nod. Meeting went fine. Graham's eyes flicked over Miles's face, searching. "You look pale. You all right?" "Just tired," Miles said, and left before Graham could say anything else. By mid-afternoon, the fear changed shape. It did not go away, but it grew heavier, more certain. He began to imagine Veronica seeing the message at the worst possible moment in front of someone else, in a board meeting with Nina standing nearby. He imagined her face hardening, her mouth tightening, the quiet click of her decision. At 4:15, his phone buzzed. Miles nearly dropped it. It was Lucy's school app reminder, early pickup location change due to construction. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not caught on the way out. At 5:30, he shut down his computer and left with the careful neutrality of a man carrying a secret. No one stopped him. No one called his name. No one asked him to come to Veronica's office. He rode the elevator down with 2 interns talking about weekend plans. Their voices were bright. Their lives seemed intact. Rain met him at the building's entrance, thin and cold. His coat darkened at the shoulders. He drove across the city with his jaw clenched, wipers steady, the radio off. Lucy ran to him at after-school care, backpack bouncing. She smelled like crayons and soap. Her hands were cold from the playground. "Daddy," she said, launching into a story before she was fully in the car. "We made volcanoes, but mine looked like a muffin, and Mrs. Nolan said it was still science." "That is absolutely science," Miles said, and meant it. Lucy chattered the whole ride home, words tumbling out, filling the car with something normal. Miles answered when he could, asked questions, laughed in the right places. His phone sat face down in the cup holder like a piece of evidence. At home, they moved through the evening in familiar steps. Shoes off, hands washed, dinner warmed in the oven, pasta that came from a jar because Miles could not handle anything more complicated. Lucy told him about a boy who ate glue in art class. Miles made the right face of horror. After dinner, Lucy did homework at the table while Miles stood at the sink staring at the rain on the window and the reflection of his own face. He looked older than 34. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for years and only just noticed. Later, Lucy brushed her teeth and lined her paper boats along the bathroom counter, preparing them for sleep like they were real. Miles helped her into bed. He pulled the blanket up to her chin and smoothed it with his palm, the same gesture he had done every night since Hannah stopped being able to. Lucy watched him for a moment, quiet now. "You are being weird," she said. Miles swallowed. "Am I?" Lucy nodded once. "You did not sing the song while you made pasta." Miles's throat tightened. "Sorry, Lou. My brain is busy." Lucy's eyes narrowed. Not unkind, just observant. Busy with scary. Miles tried to smile. It came out thin. Not scary, just grown-up stuff. Lucy accepted that the way kids accept weather, not because they understand, but because they trust you to handle it. "Okay," she said and rolled onto her side. "Night." "Night," Miles whispered. He turned off the lamp. The room went dark except for the faint glow of a nightlight shaped like a whale. Lucy's breathing evened out soft and steady. Miles stood in the doorway a second longer than usual, listening to the quiet. Then he backed away and pulled the door mostly closed, leaving the familiar crack of light from the hallway. He walked to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and finally picked up his phone again. No message from Veronica, no call from Nina. Just the last thing he wished he could take back, sitting in a thread with a name that made his pulse jump every time he read it. Miles set the phone face down on the coffee table and pressed his hands together until his fingers stopped trembling. Miles sat on the edge of the couch until the cushions stopped complaining under his weight. The living room was dim, lit only by the small lamp near the bookshelf and the faint spill of hallway light from Lucy's door. Outside, rain kept tapping the window in a steady, patient rhythm. Inside, the air smelled like dish soap and the last warm breath of dinner. His phone lay face down on the coffee table. He stared at it like it might move on its own. He flexed his fingers. His hands still felt wrong, like they belonged to a stranger who had made a stranger's mistake. He rubbed his palms together once, then pressed them flat on his knees and tried to be still. A sound cut through the quiet. Ding dong. Miles froze. The doorbell rang again, the same clean chime, too loud in the small apartment. Ding dong. His first thought was Lucy's school, a forgotten form, a lost lunchbox. His second thought was worse, faster, colder. His mind replayed the conference room glass. Veronica's face, the delivered message. He stood. His legs took a moment to remember how to work. The floor felt unsteady beneath his socks, as if the apartment had shifted a fraction off level. He moved down the short hallway toward the front door. The light above the entry buzzed faintly, tired. He reached the peephole and leaned in. On the other side of the door, under the porch light that turned rain into drifting threads, stood Veronica Vale. Not CEO Veronica, not charcoal suit and tight hair and the clipped voice that made meetings run like drills. Her hair was down dark and glossy, where it clung slightly to her coat collar. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, under a light jacket that looked more practical than expensive, though everything about her still carried a kind of precision. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Raindrops dotted her lashes. Miles forgot to breathe. Ding dong. The doorbell sound landed behind his eyes. His throat tightened so hard it hurt. He imagined the message sitting on her phone, waiting like a door she had not opened yet. He imagined her opening it now, right there before he even turned the lock. From the hallway behind him, a sleepy voice floated through the crack of Lucy's door. "Daddy!" Miles flinched, then turned his head slightly. "Go back to sleep," he called softly, trying to keep his voice steady. Lucy's door creaked a little. "Who is it?" Miles swallowed. "Just someone from work, Lou. Go back to bed." A pause. He could picture her sitting up, hair sticking in the wrong directions, eyes half shut but sharp enough to read him anyway. "It is raining," she said, like that mattered. "I know," Miles replied. "Go back to sleep." He heard the soft thump of her head returning to the pillow. Then the quiet again, though not the kind of quiet that comforted, the quiet that waited. Miles placed his hand on the doorknob. It was cool under his palm. He turned it slow, as if he could control what happened by controlling the speed. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, smelling of wet pavement and cedar. Rain hissed on the welcome mat. Veronica stood close enough that Miles could see tiny drops collecting on the edge of her jacket. Her eyes met his. Up close, they were not as hard as he remembered. They were tired, focused, human. "Mr. Harper," she said. Miles's mouth moved before his brain found a safe sentence. "Ms. Vale." She blinked once. Her gaze swept past him into the apartment, taking in the dim living room, the framed drawings on the wall, the small shoe pile by the entry. Her face did not change, but something in her posture softened a fraction. "Veronica," she corrected, voice low. "May I come in?" Miles hesitated. The hallway behind her was empty except for shadows and rain. The building's lobby light glowed faintly at the far end like a distant aquarium. He stepped aside. Yes, of course. Veronica crossed the threshold. She moved with the same economy she had in the office, but without the armor. Her shoes left small wet prints on the mat. Miles closed the door and twisted the lock, the click sounding too loud. For a second they stood there, both facing forward, neither sure what to do with hands and space. Miles realized he was still wearing an old t-shirt with a faded band logo and lounge pants that had seen better days. He felt suddenly exposed, like the apartment itself was a confession. Veronica glanced down at his hands, then back up. "I am sorry to come by unannounced," she said. "I tried calling your office earlier. Nina said you had left." Miles nodded too fast. "I picked up my daughter. After school care." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. "She is here." "Yes," Miles said. "She is asleep, mostly." Veronica's mouth tightened briefly, not in irritation, more like she was recalculating. "I can leave," she said. "We can address this tomorrow. Tomorrow at work." Under fluorescent lights, in the glass conference room, with Nina's silent presence and the hum of printers, Miles felt his stomach twist. "No," he said too quickly again. He lowered his voice. "No, it is fine. Come in." He led her into the living room. The space was small but warm, full of the evidence of a child and a life built around one. A blanket folded over the arm of the couch, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, a stack of library books that leaned like tired towers. Veronica stopped near the bookshelf, eyes moving over the titles. Her gaze landed on a row of children's books, spines bright and worn. She did not touch them. She simply looked as if reading the room the way she read budgets. Miles cleared his throat. "Do you want water tea?" "No," Veronica said. "Thank you." She removed her jacket and draped it over the back of a chair, careful not to let it brush the puzzle. The movement was so precise it almost looked like she had practiced being in someone else's home. Miles stood by the coffee table and realized there were paper boats on it, 3 of them lined up in a neat row. Lucy had left them there. Their edges were sharp, their folds clean. One had a tiny crayon star on the sail. Veronica's eyes lingered on the boats. Her expression stayed neutral, but the corner of her mouth moved almost like the ghost of a thought. Miles's heart hammered. He wanted to speak. He wanted to say the apology before she could say anything else. He wanted to get to the part where she told him what he already believed was coming. He also wanted to turn back time. Veronica sat on the couch. She rested her hands on her knees, fingers interlaced. The posture was familiar from the office, the quiet control of someone used to being watched. But in the softer lamplight, it looked different, less like command, more like bracing. Miles stayed standing. He did not trust his legs to hold him if he sat. Neither of them spoke. The rain outside filled the gap, whispering against glass. From the hallway, Lucy's voice drifted out again, thicker with sleep. "Daddy?" Miles closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. "Yes, honey." "I need water," Lucy mumbled. Miles glanced at Veronica. Her gaze moved to the hallway, then back to him. She gave a small nod as if granting permission. "I will be right back," Miles said quietly. He went to the kitchen, poured water into Lucy's small plastic cup with the whale on it, and carried it to her room. Lucy was sitting up, hair, wild eyes mostly closed. The nightlight whale cast a soft blue glow on her face. She took the cup and drank, then looked at him over the rim. Even half asleep, she could still read his body the way she read cartoons, quick and sure. "Is it Miss Vale?" she whispered. Miles exhaled slowly. "Yes." Lucy set the cup on her bedside table. "Why is she here?" Miles pressed a hand to the blanket, smoothing it the way he always did. "Work stuff," he said. Lucy's eyes narrowed. "Work stuff makes you look like you swallowed a bug." Miles tried to smile. It came out uneven. "Go back to sleep, Lou." Lucy stared at him for another beat, then leaned back. "Okay," she said, and her voice softened into something almost kind. "Do not be rude." "I will not," Miles whispered. He left the door cracked and walked back toward the living room, his pulse climbing again with every step. Veronica had not moved. She sat exactly where he had left her, but her gaze was on the wall across from the couch, where a cluster of photos hung in mismatched frames. Lucy at the zoo, Lucy with a missing front tooth, Lucy in a raincoat holding a paper boat, and one older photo slightly faded of Miles and Hannah in a hospital room, their heads close together, Lucy in Hannah's arms as a newborn. Veronica was looking at that one. Miles stopped at an sin sama sadinen. Miles stopped in the doorway. For a moment, he watched her face. He had seen Veronica in meetings where she cut down a proposal with 3 sentences. He had seen her listen to a nervous junior staffer and ask questions that made the room go still. He had never seen her look at a family photo like she was trying to understand a language she had not spoken in years. Her eyes shifted and she noticed him watching. "That is your wife," she said. It was not a question. Miles's throat tightened. "Yes," he replied. "Hannah." Veronica's gaze stayed on the frame. "She is beautiful." Miles nodded once. He did not trust himself to speak more than that. Veronica turned her head slightly toward him. "I did not know," she said. There was something careful in the words, not pity, not sympathy, but awareness. Miles felt a pressure behind his eyes that he refused to let rise. "It was 3 years ago," he said, and hated how flat his voice sounded. "Cancer." Veronica's fingers tightened together, then loosened. Her eyes lowered for a moment, then lifted back to his. "I am sorry," she said. Miles held her gaze. The apology did not erase anything. It did not fix the phone message or the fear, but it shifted the air in the room just slightly, as if a window had cracked open. He took a step forward and stopped near the coffee table. The paper boat sat between them like a fragile fleet. Miles drew a breath, felt it catch, then forced it out. "About the message," he said, voice quiet and tight. Veronica did not look away. She watched him the way she watched numbers steady and exact. Veronica did not look away. She watched him the way she watched a room, before speaking as if she could hear the truth in the pauses. Miles felt his pulse in his throat. The paper boats on the coffee table seemed suddenly too bright, too delicate. His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. "I am sorry," he said. The words came out rough. "I am more than sorry. I do not have a better word." Veronica's eyes moved once down to his hands, then back up. "You do not need a better word yet," she said. Miles let out a breath that shook. "It was not meant for you." Silence held for a beat. The rain kept talking against the glass. "It was meant for someone else," he continued, because stopping felt worse. "A woman I have been talking to, on an app. I was typing during the meeting, and I sent it to the wrong thread." Her face stayed composed, but something changed around her mouth. A small tightening, then a release. Not anger, not amusement exactly. Something like understanding that had been forced to wear a straight face. "I assumed that," Veronica said. Miles blinked. "You did?" "Yes." Her voice was even but softer than it had been in the office. "No one who has sat in my meetings for 7 months would send that to me on purpose." Heat rushed into Miles's cheeks. He looked down at the coffee table at the edge of the puzzle, at the tiny crayon star on one boat's sail. He could not look at her when she said it like that, plain and true. "I did not even realize until it was gone," he said. "It was like my thumb did it without my permission." Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your thumb has poor judgment." The corner of Miles's mouth twitched. It was not a laugh. It was a surrender to the absurdity of his own brain. "I know," he said. Veronica leaned back a fraction. The couch creaked under her, a small domestic sound that did not fit her. She seemed aware of it too. Her shoulders lifted and then settled as if she was adjusting to the fact that this room did not belong to her and was not trying to impress her. Miles cleared his throat again. "I thought I was going to lose my job." "You still think that?" Veronica said. Miles swallowed. "Yes." Veronica held his gaze. "I did not come here to fire you." The words landed like a glass of water poured into a fire. Miles did not know what to do with the relief, because relief did not erase the humiliation. It only made room for it. Then why he started, then stopped. The question sounded accusing even though he did not mean it to. Veronica's eyes flicked to the hallway, toward Lucy's room, then back. "Because tomorrow in the office, I am Ms. Vale," she said. "I am your CEO. I am the person everyone watches. If I call you into my office and close the door, people will create a story. They always do." Miles looked away, thinking of the open floor, the sideways glances, the hunger for gossip dressed up as concern. Veronica's voice continued steady. "Tonight, I am a woman standing in a stranger's living room, with rain on her coat. I can say what I need to say without a room listening." Miles's throat tightened again, but this time it was not fear. It was confusion and something like curiosity that felt dangerous. "What do you need to say?" he asked quietly. Veronica's fingers, still interlaced on her lap, loosened. She looked down at her hands as if she had not planned this part. "When I saw your message, she said I was in my office. It came through during a call with legal." Miles's stomach flipped. He pictured it, her screen lighting up with his words, the timing cruel. Veronica kept going. "I did not open it right away. I saw the preview. Enough to understand it was not about budgets." Miles pressed his lips together. He could not bear the image, but it was already in his mind, bright and permanent. "I should have handled it formally," Veronica said. "I know that. I know what policy says. I know what the handbook says. I wrote half of that handbook. Miles lifted his eyes. Then why did you not? Veronica's gaze rose, and when it met his, something unguarded showed for an instant like a crack in ice. Because it did something to me, she said. Miles's breath caught. Veronica's mouth tightened again, as if she disliked the weakness of that sentence. She tried again, cleaner. It reminded me of something I have been pretending I do not need. Miles did not move. The room felt smaller, the air warmer. He could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant rush of cars on wet streets, the soft tick of the clock above the bookshelf. Veronica glanced toward the family photos again, then at the paper boats. I spend my days being looked at as a job title, she said. A role, a threat, a problem to solve. People talk to me like I am a policy. Miles swallowed. He had talked to her like that too. Short answers, safe answers. The version of himself that never accidentally revealed a pulse. Veronica's voice lowered. Your message was not respectful, it was not appropriate, but it was honest. It was human. It was the first time in years anyone has put me in a sentence that was not about performance. Miles stared. His mind tried to build a wall out of logic and failed. You came here, he said, slow because my mistake made you feel something. Veronica's eyes held his. Yes. Miles rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly aware of how warm his skin was, how his heart would not settle. I do not know what to do with that, he admitted. Veronica's mouth softened slightly. Neither do I. A silence stretched between them, and it was not the silence of a meeting where everyone was afraid to speak. It was a silence where two people were listening to what they had already said. Miles's gaze drifted to her jacket on the chair, still damp at the cuffs. He imagined her driving through the rain to get here, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road, while his words sat in her phone like a live wire. Why not just ignore it? He asked. Pretend it never happened. Veronica exhaled a quiet sound. Because I tried that, she said, for a long time. Miles waited. My marriage ended 6 years ago, Veronica said. The sentence was controlled, but her fingers tightened on her own hand. Not in a dramatic way, not in a movie way. It ended in meetings and late nights and the slow realization that I did not remember the last time I felt wanted. Miles's chest ached with recognition, though his pain came from a different place. After the divorce, Veronica continued, I decided respect would be enough. I built myself into something efficient, something untouchable. It worked. People do not cross lines with me. Her eyes flicked to him, and the smallest hint of irony touched her face. Until today. Miles huffed a breath, the sound halfway between shame and disbelief. I did not mean to cross any line. I know, Veronica said. That is part of the problem. It was accidental, and it still landed. Miles looked down, then back up. I am sorry. Veronica lifted one hand, palm slightly out, not stopping him, just steadying the moment. Do not apologize again, she said. If you apologize enough times, it becomes a way to avoid talking about what happened. Miles's lips parted, then closed. He hated that she was right. Veronica's gaze shifted past him to the kitchen doorway. A piece of paper was taped to the fridge, Lucy's drawing of a star-shaped waffle syrup spirals, and a stick figure labeled Daddy. In the corner, a smaller stick figure held a paper boat labeled Me. Veronica nodded toward it. She drew that, she said. Miles followed her gaze, then felt a prick behind his eyes. Yes, he said. She thinks breakfast is an event. She is correct, Veronica said, and the faintest smile appeared quick and unexpected. It changed her whole face. It made her look younger, not by years, but by softness. Miles stared at the smile as if it might vanish if he blinked. Veronica seemed to realize she had revealed too much. The smile faded back into composure, but not into cold, just neutral. You make things for her, Veronica said. You show up. You keep the house running. You keep your work clean. You do not talk about yourself. Miles's stomach tightened. People talk about me, he said, usually in meetings. Veronica's eyes held his. You are quieter than your ideas. He felt exposed again, but in a different way. I am just careful, he said. I can tell, Veronica replied. Miles let out a slow breath. I have been careful since Hannah got sick. He said the words sliding out before he could stop them. Careful with money, careful with Lucy, careful with work, careful with everything that might break. Veronica's gaze softened. She did not offer pity. She offered presence, which was somehow harder to accept. And now you are on an app, she said. Miles gave a short, helpless laugh. My friends told me to try. They said I need to talk to adults. They said I need to remember I am not only a father and an employee. Veronica's eyes flicked over him, as if measuring the space between the man in front of her and the man who had written the message. And do you want that? She asked. Not what your friends want, what you want. Miles opened his mouth and found himself unable to lie. I do not know, he said. Part of me wants to stay safe forever. Part of me feels like if I stay safe forever, I will wake up one day and realize I forgot how to feel anything. Veronica's throat moved as she swallowed. That she said quietly, I understand. Miles looked at her, really looked, not the CEO in a suit. The woman who had driven through rain to sit in a small living room with paper boats and a family photo on the wall. I should not have sent that message, he said, again softer this time. Less apology, more truth. Veronica nodded, correct. Miles waited for the other shoe for the professional line she would draw. His hands were damp. He pressed them to his jeans and tried to keep his breathing steady. Veronica's eyes remained on him. But it made me curious, she said. It made me wonder who you are when you are not performing competence. Miles blinked. I do not perform. Veronica's eyebrow lifted slightly. You do. You just do it well. Miles felt his face warm. He could not argue. He could only stand there, caught between embarrassment and something else that felt like possibility. Veronica stood. The movement was smooth, practiced. She reached for her jacket, then stopped, as if she had decided not to put her armor back on yet. I am going to say something, she said, voice measured. You can tell me no. You can pretend I did not say it. Tomorrow at work, we will both behave like this living room does not exist. Miles's heart hammered. Okay, he managed. Veronica looked toward the hallway once more, checking that the apartment remained quiet. Then she looked back at him. That app is not a good place to learn how to be brave, she said. Miles blinked, caught off guard. Lucy said that to you? Veronica's mouth moved almost a smile again. No, I am saying it to you. Miles felt his breath catch. What are you saying? Veronica's voice dropped slightly. Not flirtation, not command, something between. I am saying you might try a more direct approach, she said. Dinner. Not as Ms. Vale and Mr. Harper, just as Veronica and Miles. Miles stared at her. The room tilted a fraction, not because the floor moved, but because his mind did. 1,000 thoughts rushed in sharp and frantic. Policies, power, rumors, the fact that she could destroy him without raising her voice, the fact that he had been afraid of her for months. And beneath all of it, something quieter, the way she had looked at Lucy's drawing, the way she had said she understood, the way her smile had appeared and disappeared like a secret. He swallowed. Are you asking me out? He said, voice barely above a whisper. Veronica's eyes did not waver. Yes, she said. Miles's hands clenched at his sides, then relaxed. He took a breath and felt it reach the bottom of his lungs for the first time all day. I do not know what I am doing, he admitted. Veronica's gaze held his. Neither do I, she said, but I know what I want to try. Miles let the silence sit for a beat long enough to feel the weight of choice. Then he nodded once. Yes, he said. Veronica's shoulders lowered slightly, the smallest release. She reached for her jacket and slipped it on. The fabric made a soft, damp sound. At the door she paused. Her hand rested on the knob. She turned her head back toward him. And Miles, she said. He lifted his eyes. Check the name at the top of the screen. Next time she added dry and precise. Miles let out a breath that turned into a real laugh, low and startled like he had forgotten his body could do that. Veronica's mouth curved, brief but clear. Then she opened the door and stepped into the rain. Cold air rushed in again. The porch light caught the rain on her hair, turning it into small silver threads. Miles stood in the doorway, watching her walk down the hall, her steps quiet on the carpet. He closed the door and leaned his forehead against it for a moment. The wood was cool. His heart kept beating too fast. In the hallway, Lucy's door remained cracked, a thin line of light on the floor. Miles listened. No footsteps, no small voice, only the rain outside and the distant sound of a car passing on wet streets. He stood there longer than he meant to, then turned back toward the living room, where 3 paper boats waited on the coffee table, like they had been there for a reason all along. Miles stood in the living room long after the door clicked shut. The rain outside kept its steady rhythm, patient as a metronome. The paper boats sat in a neat row on the coffee table, their folded edges catching lamplight like tiny sharp wings. He should have checked Lucy one more time. He should have washed the last dish in the sink. He should have done anything that made sense. Instead, he picked up his phone. No message from Veronica. No new notification. The screen was calm, almost innocent. He turned it over in his hand, then set it down again face up this time, as if he were daring it to make noise. Miles went to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. He did not drink. He looked at the refrigerator drawing and felt his throat tighten again. Lucy's star waffle, the syrup spiral, the stick figure labeled Daddy. the small figure labeled "Me" with a paper boat in its hands. He touched the edge of the paper just once like a person checking something real. In Lucy's room, the whale nightlight glowed. Miles stood at the crack of the door and watched her breathe slow and steady. Her hands curled near her face. He listened until his own breathing matched hers. When he went to bed, sleep came in pieces. He dozed, woke, stared at the ceiling, heard the building creak, checked the clock, checked it again. Each time his eyes closed, he saw Veronica in the lamplight, rain on her lashes, her voice low and controlled when she said her own name. Veronica. By morning, the rain had eased into mist. Seattle looked washed and pale, the sky a single sheet of gray. Miles made coffee and forgot to add sugar, then drank it anyway. He made Lucy toast with too much butter and listened to her tell him about a dream where a whale taught her math. "You look tired," Lucy said, pointing at him with a piece of toast. "I am fine," Miles said. Lucy narrowed her eyes. "That is a work voice." Miles paused. "Okay," he admitted. "I am tired." Lucy nodded, satisfied, and slid a folded paper boat across the table toward him. The boat was smaller than the others, creased tightly, a tiny crayon star drawn on the inside like a secret. "For your pocket," she said. Miles picked it up carefully. "Why?" Lucy lifted one shoulder. "In case your brain gets busy with scary." He felt something warm and painful rise behind his ribs. He slipped the boat into his coat pocket. "Thanks," he said. Lucy took another bite. Also, she added, casual, "as the weather do not be rude." Miles managed a smile. "I will try." Downtown felt louder than usual, though nothing had changed. The lobby smelled like wet coats and espresso. The elevator's mirrored walls reflected Miles back at himself. Tie slightly crooked eyes, tired jaw, set too tight. On the 20th floor, the open office hummed with muted urgency. People looked busy in a way that suggested they had learned not to look curious. Miles walked to his desk and sat down without turning on his computer. He stared at the small smudge on his keyboard, then at his phone. It did not buzz. A meeting request appeared on his calendar at 9. Monday pipeline review. Veronica chaired it. As always. At 8:58, Nina passed his doorway and paused. She held a folder against her chest, her expression neutral. "Ms. Vale is starting on time," Nina said. Miles nodded. "Of course." Nina's eyes flicked over his face, and for a second he wondered what she knew. Her gaze slid down to the edge of his coat pocket, where the paper boat made the fabric bulge slightly. Then her eyes returned to his. "Bring the revised numbers," she said. Miles stood. "I will." The conference room was the same glass box, the same bright overhead lights, the same coffee no one enjoyed. Veronica sat at the head of the table as if she had never stood in his hallway in jeans, as if she had never said her own name like an invitation. Her hair was up again, neat and severe. Her suit was black today, crisp and clean. A pen rested between her fingers. Miles took his seat and kept his hands still. He focused on breathing through his nose. Veronica began the meeting with a calm that felt almost unreal. She asked questions, listened, made decisions with clean edges. When it was Miles's turn, he spoke. His voice was steady. He did not glance at his phone. He did not glance at her mouth. He looked at the numbers and delivered them like a professional. Veronica's eyes held him for a beat after he finished. Her gaze was unreadable, but it carried something else beneath it, a faint weight that pressed against the inside of his chest. Then she looked down and said, "Thank you," like she always did. The meeting ended. People filed out. Miles gathered his folder, stood, and turned toward the door. Veronica's voice stopped him. "Mr. Harper!" He paused and faced her. Her eyes were on the papers in front of her, not on him. "Your campaign revision for Johnson," she said. "Send it to Nina by noon." "Yes," Miles replied. Veronica nodded once. "Good." Miles waited foolishly for a second sentence. None came. He walked out with his heart beating too fast. The week moved in a strange new rhythm. Work stayed work. Veronica stayed Veronica. She did not text him. She did not call. She did not give him any sign in public that a private line existed between them. If she looked at him longer than usual, it happened in moments no one else seemed to notice. Miles told himself that was the point. He told himself it was safer. On Friday afternoon, a single message appeared on his phone. As he sat at his desk staring at a blank document he should have filled with ideas. Saturday, Bainbridge, 7, if that still works. No greeting, no signature, just the sentence. Miles read it twice. His thumb hovered, then typed back. "It works." He stared at his reply and felt his face warm. It was so small, 2 words, but they felt like stepping off a curb into traffic and trusting the light. On Saturday evening, he left Lucy with Mrs. Delgado from down the hall, a retired teacher who treated Lucy like a favorite student. Lucy hugged Miles tight, then pulled back and inspected his shirt with serious eyes. "Is that your date shirt?" she asked. Miles blinked. "I do not have a date shirt." Lucy made a face that suggested this was a personal flaw. "You do now." Mrs. Delgado laughed. "Go," she told him, "before the child runs your whole life." Miles smiled, but his hands were damp as he took the elevator down. The air at the ferry terminal smelled of salt and diesel. The water was dark, rippled by wind. Seagulls cried overhead, sharp and impatient. People clustered under hoods and umbrellas, their breath visible in the colder evening. Miles stood near the railing, hands in his coat pockets. His fingers brushed paper. He pulled the small boat out and looked at the crayon star inside it. The paper had softened slightly from warmth, the folds less sharp. He slipped it back into his pocket. The ferry horn sounded deep and low. It vibrated in Miles's chest. He boarded with the crowd, found a spot near a window, and watched Seattle's skyline drift away, lights blinking through mist. His phone stayed quiet. He kept it in his pocket anyway, like a talisman and a threat. Bainbridge Island was calmer, the streets darker, the trees taller. Miles drove through neighborhoods where porch lights glowed warm behind rain. He parked near a small restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a closed florist shop. The sign outside was simple painted wood, no neon. He checked the time, 6:58. He stood under the awning rain, tapping a steady beat above him, and tried to convince his body to stop acting like he was about to present to the board. At 7 on the dot, a car pulled up and stopped. Veronica stepped out. She wore a blue dress that fell to her knees and a long coat that looked soft. Her hair was down, brushing her shoulders slightly tousled by the damp air. She closed the car door and looked toward him with a calm that did not hide nerves so much as refuse to obey them. Miles forgot to move for a second. Veronica's eyes flicked over him. "You are early." "So are you," he said. She walked toward him. The sound of her steps on wet pavement was quiet. Up close, her perfume was subtle, clean, something that reminded him of rain on stone. "You look," Miles began, then stopped, suddenly aware that complimenting the CEO of his company could sound like a trap even now. Veronica's mouth curved slightly. "Say it," she said. Miles swallowed. "You look beautiful." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." Miles shook his head quickly. "Not surprised. Just, he searched for the right sentence. I am used to seeing you in a different costume." Veronica's eyes warmed. "That costume has pockets," she said, dry. Miles let out a laugh, real this time. "Fair." Inside, the restaurant smelled of garlic and warm bread. Candlelight flickered in small glass holders. A server led them to a corner table near a window that looked out onto wet streetlights. Veronica took off her coat and draped it over the chair with careful hands. Miles wondered if she always did things with that level of control, or if she was trying to keep herself together, because being here was strange for her, too. They ordered wine. Miles chose something simple. Veronica chose with a quick glance at the list, confident. When the server left, silence hovered. Miles looked at Veronica's hands on the table. Her nails were neat. No rings. Her watch was gone. She looked like she had stepped out of a life built on schedules and into a room where time moved slower. So, Miles said, because he could not stand the silence, "Do you always pick places that feel like they are hiding?" Veronica's eyes met his. "Do you object?" "No," Miles admitted. "It is nice." Veronica nodded once. "It is quiet. The food is good. No one from the office comes here." Miles's mouth tightened slightly. "They might," he said, then realized how anxious it sounded. Veronica's gaze held him steady. "If they do," she said, "they will see 2 adults eating dinner." The sentence was simple. The subtext was not. Miles felt his shoulders loosen a fraction. They talked cautiously at first. Work stayed mostly off the table. When it came up, it came in small, neutral ways, like weather. Miles told her about Lucy's science projects. Veronica listened with real attention, not the kind she gave in meetings, but the kind that made him feel like he was not wasting her time. "She made a volcano that looked like a muffin," Miles said. Veronica's eyes widened slightly. "That is a failure." Miles grinned. "She insists it is still science." Veronica's mouth curved. "She is right," she said. "Science is mostly muffin-shaped failures." Miles laughed again. "You sound like you have done a volcano." Veronica's gaze shifted to the candle flame. "I did," she said. "4th grade. It exploded on my teacher's shoes." Miles leaned in slightly. "You were trouble." Veronica's eyes returned to him. "I was efficient," she corrected. The food arrived. Steam rose from plates. The scent of rosemary and lemon filled the space between them. Miles ate slower than he usually did, savoring the normalcy of sitting across from someone who was not Lucy, someone who could order wine and talk about books. Veronica asked what he read when he had time. Miles told her about a history book he kept starting and never finishing, pages folded at the corner, like a guilty habit. Veronica admitted she liked obscure biographies, the kind no one else would choose for vacation reading. You travel, Miles said. Veronica nodded. For work, sometimes for escape. Miles took a sip of wine. Where would you go if you did not have to escape? Veronica's eyes stayed on him a beat longer. Somewhere warm, she said. Somewhere no one expects anything from me. Miles felt that sentence in his chest. He did not know what to do with it, so he let it sit. After dinner, they shared dessert. Veronica's fork tapped lightly against the plate as she cut a piece and pushed it toward him. You are less nervous now, she observed. Miles glanced up. Am I? You are, she said. At the beginning, you were gripping your glass like it owed you money. Miles snorted. I was waiting for you to pull out a performance review. Veronica's eyes narrowed, amused. If I were doing a performance review, she said I would have brought a binder. Miles shook his head, smiling. So, this is not a binder situation. This is not a binder situation, Veronica agreed. A pause, the kind that carried weight. Miles set his fork down. Can I ask you something personal? He said, voice quiet. Veronica's gaze did not flinch. You already did, she replied, then softened. Yes. How does someone like you, Miles said, then rephrased because the words felt clumsy, how do you end up alone? Veronica looked at the candle again. The flame bent slightly with air movement, then straightened. My ex-husband was an investment banker, she said. We were perfect on paper. We were both ambitious. We both worked too much. We were a matching set. Miles watched her face as she spoke. She did not dramatize it. She did not ask for sympathy. She simply stated it like a fact that still tasted bitter. At some point, she continued, we became roommates with a schedule. Dinners that were rescheduled. Conversations that were interrupted by calls. I suggested counseling. Miles's chest tightened. He waited. Veronica's mouth pressed into a thin line. He suggested an open marriage, she said. Miles's eyebrows lifted. That is, he began then stopped. Creative Veronica supplied dry. Miles let out a slow breath. I am sorry, he said, and it was not a reflex apology this time. It came from somewhere quiet. Veronica's eyes met his. Do not be, she said. It was information, painful information, but useful. She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down with control. After that, I decided being respected was safer than being loved, she said, and the sentence landed between them like a door closing. Miles felt his throat tighten. He knew something about doors closing. He knew something about living in the quiet after. He did not reach across the table. He did not fill the space with noise. He let her have the moment, then spoke softly. I get it, he said. Different reasons, but I get it. Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly. You do not seem like the type to understand me, she said. Miles blinked. What type am I? Veronica's mouth curved. The type that makes star waffles, she said, and tries to be invisible in meetings. Miles felt heat rise in his face. I am not invisible. Veronica's gaze held his. You try, she said. You hide behind competence. You hide behind being good. Miles's fingers curled around his napkin. It is easier, he admitted. Veronica tilted her head. Is it? Miles looked at her. Not the CEO, not the woman in a dress. The person who had been betrayed and built a life that no one could touch without permission. No, he said quietly. It is not. They left the restaurant and stepped into the damp air. The rain had returned as a fine mist that clung to hair and coats. Streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. Veronica walked beside him close enough that Miles could feel warmth through fabric. Her townhouse sat in a quiet row on a hill, elegant but not loud. He walked her to the door hands in his pockets, the paper boat pressing against his fingers. Veronica turned to face him under her porch light. The glow softened her features, took the sharpness out of her cheekbones. I had a good time, she said. So did I, Miles replied, and felt the truth of it in his bones. Veronica hesitated, then lifted her chin slightly. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked. The question was simple. The air between them was not. Miles's mind flashed to Lucy asleep across town, to Mrs. Delgado's kind smile, to the fragile balance of his life. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to stop being careful. He also wanted to be the man Lucy trusted. He swallowed. I should get back, he said. Lucy will wake up early. Mrs. Delgado has church in the morning. Veronica's eyes searched his face. For a second, Miles thought he saw disappointment. Then it shifted into something else, quiet respect, maybe. Your daughter comes first, Veronica said, and the words were not a test. They were a statement. Miles nodded. Rain check, he said, voice low. Veronica's mouth curved just slightly. Definitely. She stepped closer, and Miles felt his breath catch. He expected a handshake, something formal. Instead, she lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Her lips were warm. The kiss was brief, but it left a clean burn on his skin. "Good night, Miles," she said. "Good night," he managed. He walked back to his car with his cheeks still tingling. He drove in silence, windshield wipers, steady streetlights smearing into gold lines across the wet glass. His phone stayed quiet in the console, but the absence of buzz did not feel like dread tonight. When he pulled into his building's lot, he sat for a moment with the engine off. The mist clung to the windows. Miles reached into his coat pocket and pulled out Lucy's paper boat. The crayon star inside had faded slightly from warmth and touch. It looked softer now, less perfect still intact. He held it in his palm and breathed slow and steady until the tightness in his chest loosened enough to let him move again. Miles carried the quiet of Bainbridge up the stairwell like a fragile thing he did not want to drop. The building smelled of wet carpet and someone's late-night garlic. When he unlocked his door, the apartment greeted him with warmth and stillness. The lamp by the bookshelf was off. Only the hallway light glowed thin and steady, spilling under Lucy's door. Mrs. Delgado sat on the couch with a paperback open in her lap. She looked up and smiled like she had been waiting for him to breathe again. She fell asleep to a documentary about octopuses, Mrs. Delgado whispered. "Your child has unusual taste." Miles smiled, careful and grateful. "Thank you." Mrs. Delgado waved him off. "Go look at her. I already washed the cup. Do not argue with me." Miles did not. He padded down the hallway and paused at Lucy's door. The crack of light showed the edge of her blanket and the curve of her hair on the pillow. The whale nightlight glowed blue beside her, making her look like she was sleeping underwater. He watched her breathe until his shoulders lowered. Back in the living room, Mrs. Delgado stood and slipped on her coat. She gave him a pointed look that meant she saw the softness in his face and approved. "You ate?" she asked. Miles nodded. "Yes." "Good," she said. "You need fuel for all the worrying you do." He let out a quiet laugh. "I am working on that." Mrs. Delgado patted his arm once. Her hand was warm through his sleeve. "Work faster," she murmured, then headed for the door. After she left, Miles stood alone in the living room. The couch held the faint impression of someone else's presence and then released it. He picked up the paper boat from his coat pocket and placed it on the coffee table beside Lucy's other boats, as if returning it to its fleet. He went to bed and slept better than he had in weeks. Not deep, not perfect, but enough. The next morning came with a pale sky and a fine mist that clung to the windows. Miles made coffee, Lucy ate cereal, and announced that octopuses had 3 hearts and therefore should be in charge of everything. 3 hearts, Miles said, stirring sugar into his mug. "That sounds exhausting." Lucy nodded like a scientist. "It is why they are smart." Miles dropped Lucy at school and drove downtown with his hands steady on the wheel. The city looked the same. Glass towers, wet streets, people moving like they were late. Inside him, something had shifted anyway. Not happiness exactly, more like the return of color to a room he had forgotten was gray. At the office, he walked past the framed magazine covers and caught his reflection in the glass. His eyes looked less hollow. His shoulders sat a little higher. The change was subtle, but it was there. The first meeting of the day was short, a standing check-in with department heads. Veronica ran it with the same precision as always. Her hair was up. Her suit was sharp. She spoke in clean sentences that left no room for confusion. Miles took his usual place near the side of the group. He listened. He nodded. He waited to be asked. Halfway through, a question came up about the Johnson account. The sales lead offered an idea that was fine, safe, bland. Miles felt the old habit rise in him, the instinct to stay quiet and let someone else wear the risk. Then he remembered Veronica's living room voice. "You are quieter than your ideas." Miles cleared his throat. Heads turned. The room went still. "I have a better angle," he said. His own voice sounded calm. That surprised him. Veronica's gaze lifted and landed on him. It did not soften. It did not give him an obvious signal, but it held him there steady, as if she were saying without words that he had permission to exist. Miles laid out his idea in simple steps. He talked about audience behavior and timing, and the way the story would land if they stopped trying to sound clever and started trying to sound true. When he finished, silence sat for a beat. The sales lead blinked, then nodded slowly. That he said could work. Veronica made a note on her tablet. "It will," she said. Miles felt a small surge in his chest. Not pride, something steadier. A sense of alignment, like a door clicking into place. After the meeting, he walked back to his office and found a message on his phone. "Good, keep doing that." No greeting, no signature, the same directness as her dinner invitation. The words hit him like a warm palm pressed to his back. He stared at the screen longer than he needed to. Then he put the phone down and started working. They did not text constantly. That would have felt like a trap. Most days there was one message, sometimes none. A short question about dinner, a time, and a place. Once a photo of a bookstore window display with a caption that read, "This is ridiculous. You would love it." Miles smiled so hard his face hurt. They met after work in places that did not belong to their normal lives. A quiet Thai spot in Fremont where the tables were close and the lights were low. A wine bar in Ballard where the music hummed and no one looked twice at them. Sometimes Veronica chose the place. Sometimes Miles did. Each choice felt like a small claim to personhood. On the nights they did not meet, Miles sat on the couch with Lucy and watched animated movies that Lucy insisted were educational. Lucy talked through the whole thing, explaining plot points, as if Miles might miss them. "You are not paying attention," she accused one. Tuesday eyes narrowed. Miles blinked, pulled out of his thoughts. "I am. The princess is going to sing." Lucy watched him for a second. "You are smiling," she said. Miles pressed his lips together. "Am I?" Lucy nodded, satisfied. "Good. You did not smile like that for a long time." His throat tightened. "I smile," he said. Lucy's expression stayed serious, not that kind. Miles did not argue. He hugged her closer and let the movie keep talking for him. 2 weeks after the first date, Veronica called him instead of texting. Miles answered in his kitchen, with a hand on the counter, the phone warm against his ear. Her voice came through clean and low. "I have a question," she said. "Okay," Miles replied. "Do you have time on Saturday morning?" She asked for a walk. Miles hesitated. Saturday morning belonged to War Lucifer, the pancakes and homework and errands. It was their routine, and routine was sacred. Veronica did not rush him. She waited in silence. Miles swallowed. "I can," he said, "but Lucy will be with me." Another pause. Not discomfort, not retreat, just calculation. "Where?" Veronica asked. "Green Lake," Miles said. "We go there when the weather is not trying to punish us." A soft sound came through the phone, almost a laugh. "Seattle weather is consistent," Veronica said. "It always punishes." Miles smiled. "So you want to meet my child?" "I want to meet the part of your life you protect," Veronica said. The words held subtext like a second heartbeat. Miles felt it and answered anyway. "Okay," he said quietly. "Saturday." On Saturday, the sky was the color of wet concrete. The mist was light but persistent. Miles and Lucy walked the loop around Green Lake, with Lucy hopping over puddles like they were lava. She wore her bright raincoat and carried a folded paper boat in her pocket, which she pulled out every few minutes to check, as if making sure it still existed. Veronica arrived 10 minutes late, which was unusual enough that Miles noticed immediately. She walked up with her hair down and a knit hat pulled over it, the kind of hat that made her look like a person who waited in line for coffee instead of ordering it delivered to a conference room. Lucy spotted her first. She stopped mid-hop and stared. "That is Ms. Vale," she said. Miles lowered his voice. "Veronica," he corrected. Lucy looked up at him sharply. "Veronica," she repeated, tasting the name. Then she looked back at the approaching woman with careful eyes. Veronica slowed when she saw Lucy. She stopped at a respectful distance, not crowding, not forcing herself into the child's space. Her hands stayed visible at her sides, palms relaxed. "Hi, Lucy," Veronica said. Lucy's eyebrows lifted. "How do you know my name?" Veronica's mouth curved slightly. "Miles talks about you," she said. Lucy's gaze flicked to Miles, suspicious. "What does he say?" Miles cleared his throat. "Nice things." Lucy looked back at Veronica. "Do you like science?" she asked. Veronica blinked. The question hit her like a small stone thrown without warning. Then her eyes warmed. "Yes," she said. "I like science." Lucy nodded, accepting this as the first requirement. "Do you like paper boats?" Veronica glanced down at Lucy's pocket, where the corner of the folded boat peeked out. "I have never owned one," she admitted. Lucy pulled the boat out and held it up. "This one is mine," she said, "but I can show you." Veronica crouched slightly so she was closer to Lucy's height. Her coat pulled tight across her shoulders. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone trying to pass a test she had not studied for. "I would like that," Veronica said. Lucy turned and marched toward the lake edge, where rainwater ran along the curb in a shallow stream. Miles followed, heart thumping harder than it should. Veronica walked beside him, close but not touching. Lucy knelt and placed the paper boat in the water. It bobbed, then drifted forward, nose-cutting through the thin current. "It floats," Lucy announced, pleased. Veronica watched the boat with focus that looked familiar. She looked like she was studying a balance sheet. "You made that?" Veronica asked. Lucy nodded. "I make lots. I make them when Daddy is quiet." Miles felt his stomach tighten. Lucy did not mean it as cruelty. She meant it as fact. Veronica's gaze lifted to Miles for a moment. Her eyes held something like understanding and something like respect. Then she looked back at Lucy. "Can you teach me?" Veronica asked. Lucy smiled a quick flash of victory. "Yes," she said, "but you have to fold it sharp or it will sink." Veronica nodded. "Sharp. I can do sharp." They sat on a bench under a dripping tree. Lucy pulled a napkin from her pocket, like she had planned for this, smoothed it carefully, and began giving instructions with the seriousness of a professor. Veronica followed each step with careful fingers. Her hands were precise. The folds came out clean. Lucy watched impressed, despite herself. "You are good," she said. Veronica's eyes flicked to Miles. "I have practice making things look neat," she replied. Miles felt the subtext slide into the air between them, quiet and real. When Veronica finished the boat, Lucy inspected it, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "Now you can float it." Veronica held the boat for a beat, then set it in the stream beside Lucy's. Both boats drifted forward together. Lucy grinned. "They are friends," she declared. Veronica's mouth curved into a real smile, longer this time. "Good," she said softly. Miles watched it happen, the simplest thing in the world. Two paper boats traveling side by side. He felt his chest ache with something he had not allowed himself to imagine. After the walk, they got hot chocolate from a kiosk. Veronica took a cautious sip and winced. "It is too hot," Lucy said, triumphant. Veronica nodded, eyes watering slightly. "I underestimated it," she admitted. Lucy laughed loud and bright. Veronica looked startled by the sound, then amused, then she laughed too, a small, breathy laugh that made her seem suddenly younger. Miles watched them and felt his own smile spread without permission. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, Veronica and Miles sat on his couch with 2 mugs of tea. Rain returned and tapped the window. Veronica held her mug with both hands, fingers wrapped around the heat. "I did not know she was that direct," Veronica said. Miles huffed a quiet laugh. "She is honest to the point of violence." Veronica's eyes softened. "She is brave," she said. Miles looked down at his own hands. "She gets it from Hannah," he replied. Veronica did not flinch at the name. She nodded once, respectful. Miles glanced at her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Veronica asked. "For not making it weird," Miles said. "For not treating my life like an obstacle." Veronica held his gaze. "It is not an obstacle," she said. "It is you." The sentence landed and stayed. Miles felt it settle in his chest like a weight that was also warmth. At work, they kept their distance. Veronica did not linger at his desk. Miles did not seek her out. Their conversations stayed professional in public spaces. Their voices measured, their faces neutral. Only small things slipped through. A brief glance when he spoke, a subtle pause when she passed him in the hall. Once, when a meeting ended and everyone stood to leave, her fingers brushed his hand as she reached for her folder. The touch lasted half a second and set his skin on fire for an hour. Nina saw everything. Miles was sure of it. Nina said nothing. Miles spoke up more often. Not recklessly, not constantly. But when he had an idea worth saying, he said it. Veronica responded with the same cool efficiency as she did with anyone else, but her eyes held his a fraction longer, as if checking that he meant it. On a Thursday afternoon, Miles walked into a meeting with a fresh concept for a new campaign and heard his own voice fill the room without shaking. When he finished, he glanced up. Veronica looked at him, and her expression did not change, but her eyes said, "Good." Later that evening, Lucy sat at the kitchen table, drawing. Miles washed dishes. Veronica was in the living room, shoes off, sleeves pushed up slightly, as she helped Lucy tape paper stars to a poster board for school. Lucy glanced toward the hallway, thinking, then spoke without looking up. "Why is Veronica here a lot now?" she asked. Miles froze at the sink hands and soapy water. Veronica's tape paused mid-pull. Lucy kept drawing as if asking about the grocery list. "She makes you laugh," Lucy added. "You did not laugh much before." Miles swallowed. He looked at Veronica. Her gaze was on Lucy, not on him. Her face was calm, but her fingers tightened slightly on the tape. Miles dried his hands slowly on a towel. He walked to the table and sat beside Lucy. "Do you mind?" he asked gently. Lucy thought for a second, then shook her head. "No," she said. "It is better." Veronica's shoulders lowered, a small release that could have been mistaken for a stretch if you did not know what it cost her. Lucy went back to drawing like the matter was settled. Miles watched the pencil move across paper, watched Veronica's careful hands smoothing down the star shapes, and felt the quiet of his home shift into something fuller. Outside, rain slid down the windows in thin lines. Inside, the apartment held the warm hum of 3 people breathing in the same space. On Monday morning, the apartment smelled like toasted bread and Lucy's strawberry shampoo. Miles stood at the stove, turning a pancake with a careful wrist, watching the edges for bubbles, the way Hannah once taught him. Lucy sat at the table with her elbows wide, coloring a paper boat with blue marker until the paper began to curl. Veronica leaned against the counter sleeves, pushed up mug between her hands. She watched Lucy draw with a quiet focus that made the room feel steady, not quiet like absence, quiet like attention. Lucy held up the boat. "This one is for the stream," she announced. Veronica nodded. "Then you should fold it sharp." Lucy beamed, pleased that the rule had stuck. Miles slid the pancake onto Lucy's plate and reached for the syrup. His phone buzzed on the counter, a quick vibration that made his shoulders tighten before his mind caught up. He glanced at the screen. A calendar reminder, pipeline review at 9. He exhaled and put the phone face down. Veronica's eyes flicked to it, then back to him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her silence had a way of making a person hear their own thoughts more clearly. Lucy hopped off her chair, kissed Veronica's cheek without asking permission, then ran to the hall to grab her backpack. Veronica froze for half a second, surprised, then her face softened in a way that almost looked like relief. "You are becoming a regular," Miles said quietly, stacking plates in the sink. Veronica's gaze stayed on the hallway where Lucy's footsteps thumped. "Am I allowed?" Miles looked at her. He meant his answer, yes. Veronica nodded once, and the movement was small, but it changed something in her posture, like she had been holding her breath and just realized she could let it out. By the time Miles dropped Lucy at school, the sky had lifted slightly, not to blue, but to a lighter gray that made the city feel less heavy. Lucy waved and disappeared into the crowd of raincoats. Miles watched until he could no longer see her bright hood, then drove downtown with both hands on the wheel. Cascadia Beacon Media rose out of the mist like a polished blade. In the lobby, wet coats and espresso mixed into a smell that was almost comforting. The elevator doors slid shut. People stood close without touching. Everyone stared at their phones as if the screens were safer than eye contact. Miles caught his own reflection in the mirrored wall, tie straight, hair combed, eyes a little too awake. He looked like a man who had something to lose, which meant he looked like most men in that elevator. The 20th floor opened into its usual hush. Keyboards, soft footsteps, the faint whir of a printer. Miles crossed the open office toward his desk and felt eyes on him. Quick glances that slid away the moment he turned his head. It might have been nothing. It might have been his nerves. It might have been both. Nina walked past with a folder tucked under her arm. She gave Miles a brief nod and did not stop. Her expression never offered a clue. The pipeline review began on time. Veronica sat at the head of the table, hair up suit, sharp pen in hand. She ran through the agenda with the same clean precision as always. Her voice was calm, her gaze was exact. Miles spoke when his turn came. He presented his numbers and his strategy and kept his eyes on the screen, not on her. He did not search her face for warmth. He did not allow himself to. In this room, he was Miles Harper, marketing director. Still, when he finished, Veronica's eyes held him for a fraction longer than required. "Approved," she said. "Proceed?" Miles nodded once. "Thank you." The meeting moved on. Veronica did not smile. She did not soften. But the word "approved" followed Miles out of the room and into his day like a quiet wind. At 10:15, he found himself near the break room, passing by on the way to the printer. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered, as if it resented being asked to do its job. Graham Lasky stood at the counter stirring sugar into a cup with a lazy motion, eyes half amused even when his face was still. Two executives stood near the fridge, voices low, but not low enough. "I saw Vale at Green Lake," one said. "Saturday morning, knit hat, like a normal person." Graham chuckled. Maybe she is developing a personality. The other executive laughed, then lowered his voice further, which in that small room did not matter much. She was not alone. She was with Harper, and a kid. Miles paused just outside the doorway. His hand tightened on the papers he was carrying. The edges bit into his palm. Graham's spoon clinked against the cup. "Harper," he repeated the name stretched out like something to taste. "That explains a few things, like what the executive asked, already smiling." Graham leaned back against the counter and sipped his coffee. Like why marketing suddenly gets everything it wants. A small laugh moved through the group, the kind that pretended to be harmless. Miles felt heat rise into his face. He stepped into the room because standing outside it felt like hiding. The laughter cut off, replaced by a fast silence and a flurry of fake focus. Graham glanced up. His eyes met Miles's and held for just long enough to deliver the message under the words. "We see you." Miles kept his expression neutral and walked to the printer. He collected his pages with careful fingers. No one spoke. The coffee machine hissed as if enjoying the tension. When Miles left, he could feel the laughter waiting to return the moment the door swung shut. He walked back to his office and closed the door softly. He stood there with his back against it, breathing through his nose, trying to steady the anger that pulsed in his chest. The anger was not only about Veronica, it was about being reduced, about work being turned into a joke, about someone else taking his hours, his talent, and twisting them into gossip. His phone buzzed on his desk. He flinched before he could stop himself, then glanced down. A message from Veronica. Board meeting at 2. Please send your final campaign deck to Nina by 1. Short, professional, clean. It could have been sent to anyone. Miles stared at it longer than necessary, reading into what was not there. He wanted to reply with something normal, something that reminded him of Bainbridge, of hot chocolate, of Lucy's bright laughter. He did not. He set the phone down and opened his laptop. The day tightened as it went on. Small moments that had once felt routine now felt charged. A pause in a hallway conversation as Miles approached. A glance that lingered then snapped away. A whisper that turned into a cough. At lunchtime, Miles ate at his desk. He tried to work on the Johnson campaign revisions, but his eyes kept snagging on the same slide. His mind replayed Graham's voice, the syrup of it. Marketing suddenly gets everything it wants. He thought about his proposal, the hours he spent testing headlines, the nights he stayed up after Lucy fell asleep tweaking copy until it sounded true, the way he fought for a concept that did not insult the audience's intelligence. The approval this morning had meant something. It had been validation. Now, it felt like a target painted on his back. At 1:30, Nina came into his office without knocking. She rarely did that. Ms. Vale would like the deck printed, Nina said. Miles blinked. Printed. Nina nodded. Board copies. His stomach tightened. Is everything okay? Nina looked at him with her usual unreadable calm. Ms. Vale has a board meeting, she said. That is never okay. She turned to leave, then paused. Her eyes flicked to his face with something like calculation. Be careful, she said quietly. Miles's throat tightened. Careful about what? Nina's gaze held his for a beat. About walking into glass, she replied, then she was gone. Miles sat very still. The words landed heavier than they should have. In this building, glass meant transparency, but it also meant visibility. It meant everyone could see you when you thought you were alone. At 2, the board meeting began behind closed doors on the top floor. Miles was not invited. He did not need to be. He could imagine it anyway. The long table, the water pitchers, the silent power of people who did not create anything but still controlled everything. Veronica would stand at the head of it, shoulders squared, speaking in a voice that did not ask permission. Marion Stokes would listen with her eyes narrow, her questions sharp. Someone would mention risk. Someone would mention headlines. Someone would mention human resources. Miles tried not to think about it. He failed. At 4:20, he walked past the executive hallway and saw Veronica through the glass. She was standing with Marion Stokes, both of them near a window that looked out over the city. Marion's posture was stiff. Veronica's hands were clasped behind her back, in the position she used when she refused to show stress. Veronica's face was composed, but Miles saw a flicker in her jaw, a tension that suggested she was holding something in place. Her eyes turned and met his through the glass. For a second, they were simply two people staring at each other from opposite sides of a wall no one else could see. Then Veronica's gaze slid away as if nothing had happened. Miles kept walking. By Friday, the rumor had spread enough that it changed the air. People did not say anything directly. They did not need to. The jokes were in the pauses, in the way conversation stopped, when Miles approached, in the way someone said nice job with just enough emphasis to twist it. Miles kept working. He delivered results. He spoke in meetings. He refused to shrink even when his stomach knotted. That afternoon, Veronica approved the final Johnson campaign. The message came through in a terse email. Proceed. Launch Monday. Miles stared at the screen. The approval should have felt like victory. It felt like gasoline poured on a fire. He went to the break room for water and found the same group as before gathered near the coffee machine. Graham was there, of course. He leaned against the counter with his cup in hand, smiling like he owned the room. Two executives stood close to voices low, and this time Miles was not outside the door. He was inside, close enough to hear every word. Wonder what Harper does to get his decks approved so fast, one executive said, mouth curled. Must be impressive. The other chuckled. Ice Cold Vale actually smiled this week. That should tell you something. Graham made a soft sound, not quite laughter, not quite agreement. Some people have talents that are not on their resumes, he said. The words slid into Miles's chest like a blade. He felt his vision sharpen the room, narrowing to the coffee machine, the wet counter, Graham's hand wrapped around the cup. Miles set his water bottle down carefully, as if he had all the time in the world. He looked at the executives, then at Graham. "It was approved because it is good work," Miles said. The room went still. Even the coffee machine seemed to quiet. Graham lifted his eyebrows. "Of course," he said, voice smooth. "No one said otherwise." The lie sat between them. It smelled like burnt coffee. Miles's hands curled. He forced them open again. He wanted to say something that would cut. He wanted to make Graham bleed with words. He did not. He turned and left with a calm that felt like a costume stretched too tight. He walked down the hall with his pulse pounding past desks and glass walls and people who pretended not to watch him. He did not stop at his office. He did not pause to breathe. He went straight to Veronica's suite. Nina sat outside the door, typing with her usual quiet efficiency. Her eyes lifted when she saw Miles approach. Something in her expression shifted a warning that arrived too late. Miles did not slow down. He reached the door and pushed it open without knocking. Veronica looked up from her computer. Her face was professional, controlled, and for a second there was a flicker of surprise. "Miles," she said, voice calm. "What is this?" He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The soft click sounded like a lock turning. "We need to talk," Miles said. Veronica's gaze sharpened. "About work." Miles felt the heat in his chest climb higher. He took a step forward. The glass walls of her office reflected them both, two figures framed by the city behind. "No," he said, voice tight. "About what they are saying." Veronica did not move. Her hands stayed on the desk, fingers relaxed as if she could keep control by keeping still. "What are they saying?" she asked. Miles laughed, once sharp and humorless. "That my campaign got approved because of you. Because of us. That I am not earning anything, that I am trading something for it." Veronica's eyes narrowed. The muscles in her jaw tightened. "And you believe them?" Miles flinched. "No," he said quickly. "That is not what I meant." Veronica stood. The movement was smooth, deliberate. The CEO mask slid fully into place. Her voice cooled. "Then tell me what you mean," she said. Miles took another step forward, then stopped. He could see his own reflection in the glass behind her face, flushed eyes bright with anger. "I worked for that approval," he said. "I worked hard. I stayed up. I earned it. Now they are turning it into a joke. They are turning me into a joke." Veronica's gaze held his. "I approved it because it was the right decision," she said. "If they cannot recognize that it is their failure." Miles shook his head. "It does not feel like their failure," he snapped. "It feels like mine." Veronica's eyes flashed. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, voice controlled but edged. "Reject your work to satisfy gossip. Publicly insult you to prove I'm impartial." Miles dragged a hand through his hair. His fingers shook. "I do not know," he said. "I just know this is not working." The sentence landed hard in the quiet. Veronica went very still. Her expression did not crack, but something in her eyes changed, a brief flicker of hurt that vanished so fast, Miles wondered if he imagined it. Miles's breath caught. The anger in his chest faltered, replaced by a sudden dread that he had stepped into something deeper than a rumor. Veronica's voice came out quieter. "Is that what you think?" she asked. "That this was a mistake?" Miles opened his mouth to correct himself, to soften it, to pull the words back. The glass walls held their reflections like a warning, and the air between them felt sharp enough to cut. Miles opened his mouth to pull the sentence back, to reshape it into something safer. The words had already landed. They sat between them, heavy and final. Veronica's eyes stayed on him. Her face did not change, but the air did. It sharpened the way it did when she walked into a meeting, and everyone remembered their place. "That is what you said," she replied. "I said this is not working," Miles said, voice tight. "I meant the rumors, the way people talk, the way they look at me. I meant the situation." Veronica's gaze held his without mercy. "You chose your words," she said. "You do not get to edit them after they cut." Miles flinched. He dragged a hand through his hair, again, fingers catching at the roots, like he could grab his thoughts and drag them into order. "I am angry," he said. "I am embarrassed. I am tired of being treated like I am a shortcut." Veronica's jaw tightened. "And you think I am the reason they do that?" "No," Miles said quickly. "No, Veronica. I think I am the reason because I let them get inside my head." Veronica's expression did not soften. It went quieter. That was worse. "You heard gossip," she said, voice controlled. "And you came in here to tell me it is not working." Miles swallowed. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. The office felt too exposed, the glass too honest. "I came in here because I did not know where else to put it," he said. I did not want to say it at home. Lucy was in the next room. I did not want to say it over text. I needed to look at you and say it out loud. Veronica's eyes flicked to the glass wall toward Nina's desk, outside toward the hallway beyond. Then she looked back at him. At work, she said, you and I are not supposed to have out loud. Miles felt his throat tighten. But we do, he said. We have it anyway. Veronica's voice stayed calm, and that calm contained something sealed. Do you want me to apologize for being your boss? Miles stared at her. No. Do you want me to be less competent so people feel comfortable? She asked, the words precise. No. Do you want me to deny your work? Because you are afraid of what a man like Graham Lasky says in a break room, Veronica continued. Miles's shoulders lifted with a sharp breath. No, he said again louder. I want them to stop. Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly. That is not a lever I have, she said. I can fire people. I can promote people. I can restructure a company. I cannot force grown adults to behave like grown adults when they want a story. Miles's anger surged again, hot and helpless. Then what he demanded. We just live with it. We just let it poison everything. Veronica's gaze stayed steady. What we do, she said, is we behave professionally. We do our jobs. We do not hand them anything to use. Miles heard the subtext under her words. Hide, control, minimize. The very walls she had told him she built. His chest tightened. And outside work, he said, voice rough, we keep pretending we are not real. Veronica's eyes flashed quick. Do not do that, she said. Miles blinked. Do not do what? Do not accuse me of pretending, Veronica replied. You are the one who came in here and called it a mistake. Miles's mouth opened, then closed. He could not deny it. He could only feel it the way shame pressed into his ribs. I did not mean, he started. Veronica lifted a hand, palm angled slightly down, not stopping him by force, stopping him by control. The gesture was so familiar, it made Miles feel small. I understand perception, Veronica said. I understand scrutiny. I understand the board and legal in HR. I am not naive. If you cannot live with this, then we should not do it. Miles's throat tightened. That is not what I want. Veronica's eyes held his. Then what do you want? She asked, and the question was quiet enough to sound dangerous. Miles stared at her and realized he did not have a clean answer. He wanted the comfort of Veronica's laugh in his living room and her steady presence beside Lucy at Green Lake. He wanted his work respected. He wanted his life uncomplicated. He wanted everything. His silence answered for him. Veronica's face shifted almost imperceptibly. Hurt tried to surface and got buried under professionalism. If this is not sustainable, she said, voice, even then we should take a step back. Evaluate. We can do that like adults. Miles took a small step forward, instinct, then stopped again. Veronica, I do not want to lose you, he said. Her eyes flicked to his mouth, then away. Then do not tell me you made a mistake, she replied. Miles opened his mouth again. I am sorry. Veronica's expression went still. Do not, she said, not right now. She turned and walked back to her desk. The movement was smooth and final, the same motion she used to end a meeting. She sat down, placed her hands on the keyboard, and looked at her screen like it held the only truth she was willing to tolerate. Miles stood there stunned, staring at the back of her chair, at the line of her shoulders, at the way she kept herself perfectly composed, even when the room felt like it had cracked. Was there anything else, Veronica asked, not looking at him. Miles's chest tightened. The words he wanted were crowded, messy, full of fear and tenderness and regret. None of them fit inside the shape she offered. No, he said, voice thin, nothing else. He opened the door and stepped out. Nina looked up from her desk. Her eyes flicked over Miles's face, then dropped to her screen again. She did not speak. The silence felt deliberate, a curtain drawn. Miles walked back through the open office with his head up and his stomach hollow. The lights were bright. The glass walls reflected him from every angle. He felt visible in a way he had never wanted. At his desk, he sat down and stared at the screen until words blurred. His phone lay beside his keyboard. It did not buzz. When the elevator doors opened at the end of the day, Veronica was inside with two executives. She stood near the back wall, posture, perfect, eyes forward. Miles stepped in and took a spot near the front, leaving space between them. The ride down was quiet. The executives talked about a vendor issue, voices casual. Veronica did not look at Miles. Miles did not look at Veronica. At the lobby, she stepped out and walked away without a glance. Miles followed at a distance, watching the back of her coat disappear into the rain like she had never stood under his porch light. That night, Miles ate dinner with Lucy and answered her questions with the wrong kind of calm. He laughed at the glue story again, but the laugh did not reach his chest. Lucy watched him with narrowed eyes as if she were collecting data. When Lucy went to brush her teeth, Miles stood at the sink and stared at the running water. His hands moved automatically, rinsing plates, stacking them, wiping the counter until it shone. His phone sat on the table, silent. He did not sleep much. He lay awake and listened to the building. The radiator clicks, the far-off siren, the rain. He imagined Veronica in her townhouse sitting alone with her laptop, building her walls back up with a steady hand. The next day at work, she was Veronica Vale, CEO, as if the living room never existed. She ran meetings, issued directives, made decisions. She spoke to Miles when necessary, and only when necessary. "Mr. Harper," she said in a meeting tone neutral, "send the revised copy to Nina." "Yes," Miles replied, tone neutral. No private glance, no message afterward, no pause in the hallway. When he passed her in the corridor, she nodded once, polite, a stranger's nod. Miles tried to tell himself it was temporary. He tried to tell himself she needed time. He tried not to tell himself anything at all, because his thoughts were knives. On Wednesday, he sent a short text after work. "Can we talk?" The message sat on his screen with no reply. On Thursday, he waited near the elevators at 5:30, pretending to check his phone. Veronica walked out of the executive hallway with Nina beside her. Nina spoke quietly, handing her a folder. Veronica listened without changing her face. Miles stepped forward. "Veronica," he said. Veronica stopped, but only long enough to turn her head slightly. Her eyes met his, cool and careful. "Not here," she said. The elevator doors opened. Veronica stepped inside. Nina followed. The doors slid shut, sealing them behind glass. Miles watched his reflection in the doors, a man standing too close to a closed thing. Friday night, Lucy noticed the absence like she noticed weather. They ate dinner at the table, just the two of them. Lucy pushed peas around her plate, then looked up. "Where is Veronica?" she asked. Miles felt the question land in his stomach. He kept his face calm. "She is busy." Lucy's eyebrows pulled together. "Busy with work?" "Yes," Miles said. Lucy stared at him, quiet. The silence from her was never empty. It was a wind-up. "You did something," she said. Miles blinked. "Why do you think that?" Lucy pointed her fork at him like a tiny judge. "Because you are doing the thing." "What thing?" Miles asked, trying to sound light. Lucy sighed, the exaggerated sigh of someone forced to explain something obvious. "You get scared and then you push people away." Miles sat back, slightly breath-catching. "I did not push her away." Lucy tilted her head, eyes sharp. "You made your face hard," she said. Then she made her face hard. "Then nobody laughs." Miles swallowed. The room smelled like tomato sauce and dish soap. The overhead light hummed. He heard the neighbor's dog again, one bark, then quiet. "Lucy," he said softly, "this is grown-up stuff." Lucy shrugged. "I am 7. I know grown-up stuff." Miles pressed his lips together. "Who told you that?" Lucy's gaze held his. "Mom," she said. The name hit him like a hand to the chest. Miles's fingers tightened around his water glass. He set it down carefully. "When did she tell you that?" he asked. Lucy leaned her elbows on the table. "Lots of times," she said. "She said you build walls when you are afraid of getting hurt. She said it was her job to knock them down." Miles stared at his daughter, unable to speak. Lucy's voice softened just slightly. "Maybe it is Veronica's job now," she said. Miles felt his throat tighten. His eyes burned. He blinked hard and forced the burn back. Lucy watched him, and then, because she was still a child, she reached for the salt shaker and poured a little pile on her napkin. She poked it with her finger, as if rearranging tiny grains could solve the room. "Are you going to fix it?" she asked. Not dramatic, just direct. Miles looked at her. The question was simple. The answer was not. He reached across the table and covered Lucy's hand with his warm palm over small fingers. Lucy squeezed once, then went back to her salt pile like the matter was still open. After she went to bed, Miles stood in the living room, with all the lights off, except the lamp near the bookshelf. The paper boat sat on the coffee table. One had a smudge of blue marker on its sail. The edges were slightly softened from being handled and loved. Miles picked one up and turned it in his hands. The folds were not perfect anymore. It was still a boat. He sat down on the couch and held it in his palm until his grip loosened and his breathing slowed. He did not reach for his phone. He did not draft another message. He simply sat with the quiet and the weight of Lucy's words, listening to the rain find the window again. Miles sat on the couch with the paper boat resting in his palm until the lines of his hand pressed into its softened folds. Rain whispered at the window. The lamp by the bookshelf cast a small pool of light that made the rest of the room feel farther away than it was. He could hear Lucy breathing down the hall, steady and unaware of the mess adults could build out of a few sentences. His phone lay on the coffee table. He did not pick it up. He turned the boat over slowly. The little crayon star inside the fold looked smudged now, not ruined, just lived in. He thought about the way Veronica's hands had folded paper at Green Lake, precise and careful, as if neatness could keep something from sinking. He thought about her face behind glass in the executive hallway, the control, the tension in her jaw, the way she had looked through him without looking at him. Miles closed his eyes and let Lucy's words replay, simple as a fact. You get scared and then you push people away. When he opened his eyes again, his chest still hurt, but the hurt had changed shape. It felt less like panic and more like direction. On Saturday morning, Lucy woke early and asked for pancakes. Miles made them without singing and caught himself halfway through. He cleared his throat, then started the silly song Hannah used to invent on the spot. Lucy stared at him for a second, then grinned like she had been waiting for it. Better, she announced. Miles flipped a pancake and tried to smile like it was nothing. The batter smelled like vanilla. The kitchen window held a foggy view of the street, gray and wet. Lucy pushed syrup across her plate in a spiral. Are you going to fix it? She asked, mouth full. Miles stared at the stove for a beat. Yes, he said. Lucy nodded once, satisfied, and slid a sheet of paper toward him. Then take this, she said. He looked down. It was a clean square torn from her notebook, already creased down the center. You want me to make a boat? Miles asked. Lucy shrugged. You do not fold sharp. Veronica folds sharp, but you can try. Miles tried. The boat came out lopsided, one side higher than the other. Lucy inspected it like a quality control manager, then tapped the crooked edge with her finger. It will still float, she decided. Miles slipped the boat into his coat pocket, even though he was not leaving the apartment. He carried it all day anyway, like a weight that reminded him to keep moving. On Monday, he woke before the alarm. The sky outside was still dark rain, turning the streetlights into soft halos. He made coffee and drank it standing up. He checked on Lucy, tucked her blanket higher, and watched her sleep for a long moment. At the office, he arrived early enough that the lobby felt empty. The security guard nodded at him, surprised. The elevator carried him up with only the hum of cables and his own breathing for company. The 20th floor was quiet. The open office looked different without people, like a stage before the actors arrived. Miles walked to the printer with a file open on his phone, his thumb steady this time. He did not print the whole message. He printed a cropped screenshot, just enough to show the wrong thread, the wrong name at the top, and the first line of his confession. The rest he blurred with a black bar, as if he could preserve dignity by controlling the shape of the evidence. He stared at the paper in his hands. It felt heavier than it should. Then he pulled Lucy's lopsided boat from his pocket and placed it on top of the screenshot. He wrote on the bottom margin with a pen he found in the supply drawer. Some mistakes are worth making. Can we talk? The ink looked dark and final. He walked down the executive hallway. The carpet muffled his steps. He passed the glass wall of Veronica's suite and saw her office, empty, lights off, except for the soft glow of the city outside. Nina was not there yet. Miles opened the door with his keycard, stepped inside, and placed the paper on Veronica's desk, centered like a document meant to be found. The paper boat sat on top, leaning slightly to one side, stubborn and imperfect. He stood there for a second too long, staring at it, as if it might answer him. Then he left. The morning crawled. The office filled with people, voices, coffee, the familiar hum of work. Miles sat at his desk and tried to focus on campaign copy, but every few minutes his attention snapped back to the image of Veronica finding the boat. His phone buzzed once at 10:30. He flinched, then looked. A meeting request from Nina placed at 12:15. Subject line urgent. Miles's stomach dropped and then steadied. He set the phone down carefully, as if careless movement could break the moment. At 12:15, Nina appeared at his door. She did not step in. She simply looked at him. Ms. Vale will see you now, she said. Miles stood. His hands were cold. He walked down the hallway with his pulse loud in his ears, trying to keep his face neutral as people glanced up from their screens. Nina led him into Veronica's office and closed the door behind him. Veronica stood by the window, looking out at the city. The rain had eased into mist again. The skyline softened. Her posture was straight. Her shoulders were still. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Close the door, she said without turning. Miles did. The click of the latch sounded like a decision. Veronica turned and faced him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes looked tired. On her desk, the printed screenshot lay flat, the lopsided boat still on top like a tiny dare. I received your note, Veronica said. Miles nodded once. I hoped you would. Veronica walked to her desk and picked up the paper, holding it by the edges. Her thumb brushed the blacked-out section, then the ink of his handwriting. She set it down again and looked at the boat. "You brought this here," she said. "It is Lucy's," Miles replied. "She made me fold it. She said it will still float." Veronica's mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "Lucy has faith," she said. Miles swallowed. "So do I." Veronica lifted her gaze. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. "Or is it a line you are practicing because you want a better outcome?" Miles held her eyes. The urge to defend himself rose and then fell away. He was tired of defense. "It is true," he said. "The only thing I do not have faith in is my own courage. That is what I learned last week." Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly. "You stormed into my office and told me it was not working," she said. That did not sound like a man learning courage. Miles nodded. "I know," he said. "I was angry and I was scared. I let other people's mouths decide what my life meant." Veronica's jaw tightened. "And what does your life mean?" she asked. Miles took a breath and felt it reach deep all the way down. "It means Lucy," he said. "It means my job. It means showing up. It means being careful." He paused. His hands curled and uncurled at his sides. "And it means you," he added, "even if it complicates everything." Veronica's gaze held his. The room felt very quiet, as if it were listening. "You know the risks," she said. "Yes," Miles replied. "The board will not like this," Veronica said. "I do not need them to like it," Miles said. "I need them to respect that we can handle it like adults. Disclosures, boundaries, whatever it takes. I am not asking you to bend rules. I am asking you to stop letting my fear write the ending." Veronica's eyes softened a fraction at the last word, as if she disliked how it sounded and could not deny it either. She looked down at the screenshot again. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw this?" she asked. Miles shook his head, throat tight. "I thought," Veronica said, voice low, "this is a man who knows what he wants and is not ashamed to say it." Miles felt heat rise to his face. "You are going to keep torturing me with that forever," he murmured. Veronica's mouth curved slightly. "Possibly," she said. Then the curve faded. "But last week you were not that man. Last week you looked ready to run." Miles nodded slowly. "That man is still me," he said. "He just got scared and tried to build a wall." Lucy noticed. You noticed. I noticed finally. Veronica's throat moved as she swallowed. For a moment, the CEO mask wavered, not falling off, but thinning. "I missed you," she said so quietly that Miles almost thought he imagined it. His chest tightened. "I missed you too," he replied. Veronica looked at him for a long moment, then lifted her chin slightly. "If we do this," she said, "we do it properly. No hiding at work, no favoritism, no private meetings behind glass where people invent stories. I will speak with legal. I will speak with the board." Miles nodded. "And I will keep earning my work," he said. "Not because I have to prove anything to them, but because I have always earned it. That does not change." Veronica watched him, and something in her eyes shifted the way it had shifted under his porch light. A crack in the ice, a warmer current. Miles took a small step closer. "I am not scared anymore," he said. Veronica's breath caught just a little. Miles glanced at the window behind her. The blinds were half closed, casting striped shadows on the carpet. He walked past her slowly, not pushing, not rushing, and reached for the cord. Veronica's voice came out sharp. "Miles." He paused with his hand on the cord and looked back at her. "I do not want to be a secret," he said. Veronica held his gaze for a beat, then her shoulders lowered slightly, a small surrender that looked like relief. Miles pulled the cord. The blinds lifted. Gray Seattle daylight spilled into the office, soft and honest. The glass walls no longer felt like hiding places. They felt like windows. Miles crossed back to Veronica. He stopped close enough to feel her warmth, close enough that the air between them turned thin. "Tell me to stop," he said. Veronica's eyes flicked to his mouth, then back to his eyes. "Do not stop," she whispered. Miles put his hands gently at her waist and kissed her. It was not a performance. It was not a statement for anyone else. It was a choice made in a room where choices had always been controlled. Veronica's hands rose to his shoulders, gripping lightly, as if holding on to something real required practice. When they pulled apart, Veronica's breath was uneven. Her cheeks were slightly flushed. She looked up at him with a mix of disbelief and something like amusement. "Well," she said, voice soft, "that will complicate the rumor cycle." Miles let out a quiet laugh, forehead almost touching hers. "Let them have something true for once," he said. The next weeks were not simple. Meetings happened with legal, forms were signed, reporting lines shifted so Miles did not answer directly to Veronica on projects she approved. A policy update circulated written in careful corporate language that pretended human hearts were administrative details. People still talked. Graham still smiled too easily. But the shape of the gossip changed when it had to face daylight. It became less confident, less sharp. Miles kept showing up. He kept speaking in meetings, voice steady. Veronica stayed professional in public, but her eyes met his, sometimes brief and clear, like a hand on his back. Lucy adjusted faster than anyone. One Saturday morning, 6 months later, Miles stood at the stove making star waffles while Lucy set the table. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter again, like the beginning of something. Rain tapped at the window lighter, now almost friendly. 3 plates, Lucy said, placing them with careful symmetry. Miles smiled. You are in charge of operations? Lucy nodded gravely. I have 3 hearts. The doorbell rang. Lucy ran to answer it before Miles could stop her. Veronica, Lucy shouted, already opening her arms. Veronica stepped inside with a coat speckled by mist. She bent and hugged Lucy tight, then looked up at Miles over Lucy's shoulder. Her hair was down, her eyes were bright. The sight still hit him in the chest like a quiet shock. Perfect timing, Miles said. Veronica's mouth curved. I planned it, she replied. Lucy let go and darted back to the table. Veronica stepped closer to Miles, and he kissed her quick and familiar, the way people kissed when it was normal. They sat down to eat. The waffles were slightly lopsided. Lucy poured syrup in spirals and declared it science. Veronica laughed a real laugh, then caught Miles watching her, and rolled her eyes as if he were being sentimental. Miles's phone buzzed under the table. His shoulders tensed out of habit, then loosened when he saw the sender. Veronica sitting right across from him. He opened the message and felt heat rise into his face. Still thinking about that line you almost sent me, the counter one. Miles looked up. Veronica watched him with a small, wicked smile. Lucy squinted. Adults are weird, she said, cutting into her waffle. Miles laughed low and helpless, and Veronica's smile widened. The rain kept tapping the window. The apartment held the warm noise of forks on plates, Lucy's running commentary, Veronica's quiet replies, and Miles's laughter finally unforced. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.